Welcome back to Pursuing Justice. I'm Harriet Hendel. Today we are talking to Jeff Smith, who was our guest last time. This is our second part of our interview with him. He has written a memoir, and the memoir is called Mr. Smith Goes to Prison. Jeff was a public policy professor at the New School, and he also served in the Missouri Senate. He has a BA in Black Studies from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and a master's and a PhD from Washington University. I encourage my listeners to hear part one of my interview with Jeff, where he speaks about his year in a federal prison. Welcome back, Jeff. It's good to be able to continue our discussion about the criminal justice system, a topic very close to my heart.
Hey, it's good to be back, Harriet. Thanks so much for having me again.
You're welcome. Let's talk today. Listen, I guess, to you read a little section of your book, and then I wanted to go into what it was like for you to come out of prison. So read us whatever you've selected from your book to give us an idea of what it was like to be inside.
Okay, let me read a little section from the opening of my book.
Okay.
The first correctional officer that I met had two visible teeth. I came in with a young black guy who mumbled and a Chinese guy who spoke broken English, but at least I could decipher their words. The CO was much harder to understand. Manchester, Kentucky's tucked in an Appalachian hollow, and he'd apparently never left. When he sauntered into the austere holding room and asked the Chinese man his name, the guy replied, "Shui Ming Chung?" "Sesame chicken," replied the CO, laughing uproariously and then repeating it twice as if it were the funniest thing he'd ever heard. He sent me to a heavy-set nurse for a battery of questions. "Height and weight?" she asked. 5'6", 120, I said. She examined my slight frame and frowned. "Education level?" "PhD." She shot me a skeptical look. "Last profession?" "State senator." "Well, I'll put it down if you want. If you want to play games, you can play games all you want. Fit right in right here. We got ones that think they're Jesus Christ." Another guard escorted me to a bathroom without a door. He was morbidly obese and spoke gruffly in a thick Kentucky drawl. "Strip," he commanded. I did. "Turn around," he barked. I did. "Now open up the prison wallet." I looked at him quizzically. "Turn around and open up your damn butt cheeks." I did. He manhandled me roughly. "All right, you's good to go." The last stop in the office was in the office of the counselor, a wiry, compact, sandy-haired man named Mr. Sims, with a light blue polo-style shirt and a wispy mustache. He flipped through my pre-sentencing report, pausing briefly to absorb the case summary, and shook his head. "This is crazy," he said quietly, without looking at me. "You shouldn't be here. Complete waste of time, money, and space." A complete waste. Exactly. Finally, somebody agreed. But now, it was too late.
That's great, Jeff. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you, why Kentucky? Why did they send you there?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the federal system, the Bureau of Prisons is, unless there's an extraordinary circumstance, or then the Bureau of Prisons has to keep people within 500 miles of their home because, that it's seen as best practices to keep people as close to family, community support as possible. So that prison in Kentucky was like exactly 500 miles away from my house. It might have been like 501 miles or so. So I think they put me as, even though I requested to be at one of the closer federal prisons, they put me as far away as possible.
What would have been closer? What prison?
The Greenville one in Greenville, Illinois, I think would have been
Oh,
the closest one. There were 2 or 3 other options that were closer.
oh, okay. So Kentucky it was. So I wanted also to go back for a moment to your subtitle, and you use the words America's prison crisis. How do you define America's prison crisis?
Well, the fact that we incarcerate more people than any nation in the history of the world, the fact that we've got 4% of the people in the world, but 25% of the world's inmates, so 6 times more, proportionally. The fact that even after, 40 years of rising incarceration, we're just beginning to flatten the curve, but don't appear to have any broad national strategy to get back to something approximating normalcy within other industrialized democracies. The fact that in Denmark or Sweden or any number of other countries, you have recidivism rates in the teens, whereas in the United States, over 70% of people who leave prison are rearrested within 5 years of coming home. This kind of revolving door and these kinds of numbers are unprecedented in the scope of history. And yet we don't seem to have a coherent national plan to address them. That's what I mean.
No, we don't. No, we certainly don't. All right, let's talk a little bit about your time after you were released. What year was that?
I was released at the end of 2010.
Oh, 2010. All right. So oh boy, that's 10 years ago. And your book was published in 2015, right?
That's right. Yes.
Right. So reentry is a huge challenge for anyone who has spent time in prison, particularly those who are innocent and end up doing decades behind bars. I know a little bit about that as I've been an active volunteer with the Innocence Project of Florida for the last 11 years. Do you have any thoughts on the whole issue of wrongful conviction?
Obviously we, especially in capital cases where the punishment can be irreversible, we've got a big problem in this country. The use of DNA evidence in recent years is encouraging. I know you've done a lot of work in this area, Harriet, highlighting some of the injustices, as have people like the great Brian Stevenson, who's one of the great civil rights leaders of our time. So, the state of Illinois, I think, has freed 25 people off of death row, maybe even more by now, due to exculpatory DNA evidence. And I think, one thing we should do to prevent making these irreversible decisions in capital cases is we should abolish the death penalty nationally to make sure that if exculpatory DNA evidence ever does emerge in these cases, that people are still alive to be freed.
Right, absolutely. Funny you should mention Brian Stevenson. My sister just gave me an article from the New Yorker written by Jeffrey Toobin about him, about Stevenson. And I know so much about him. I've met him 3 times, loved his book, loved the movie. And he really is a giant, an absolute giant of a man. So interesting you should bring his name up. Did you get to know anyone in federal prison who maintained their innocence? And do you know of anyone who spent time in a state prison who was innocent?
Contrary to popular belief, most prisoners don't go around saying that they were railroaded. Mm-hmm. Most prisoners will tell you exactly what they did. And in fact, some say that they probably should have been, they were lucky they didn't get caught for other things. So, no, I can't say that I know people who were wrongfully convicted.
I see. Okay, so let's address your re-entry experience. If you can tell us what that was like.
Yeah, so when I came home from prison, I had advantages that 99.9% of people that come out of prison in this country will never have. I had a home to go home to, right? Like I was able to put away money so that my mortgage could be paid while I was incarcerated. I had a family that, of course, my mom was furious with me for what I did, but they were still there if I needed them, my parents and my brother. I had a woman who stood by me. We weren't yet married, but we are now. I had a PhD from one of the best universities in the country, Washington University. I had 300 people who wrote letters of support to the judge in my case requesting clemency on my behalf, which is almost like having 300 letters of reference, right? If you're looking for a job. I'm white. In every regard, I was advantaged compared to most people coming home from prison. And you know what? I had a hard time finding a decent job. I remember my first interview. I interviewed with a very small affordable housing nonprofit agency. And at the end of the interview, the vice chair of the board, she said, look, you got everything we're looking for in this position. You know how to raise money. You know how to build a grassroots organization. You know how to advocate on behalf of a cause. You know the procedure in Jeff City, and you know the people. But why shouldn't we let another organization hire you now, and we could hire you away from them in 6 months or a year once the aroma has begun to wear off a little bit?
Oh, wow. So
if that's the question that I got. Imagine what most people coming out of prison without all the advantages that I had. Imagine what job interviews are like for them.
Oh, easy, very easy to imagine, because you just painted a scenario of yourself, and there's just no comparison between you and the average person coming out. So as a result of not getting that job, what happened?
Well, had I not gotten that job, is that what you're asking? What would have happened?
No. They didn't hire you. Is that correct?
No, they did hire me.
Oh, they did hire you. Okay.
They did hire me. And in fact, 10 years later, I'm now the executive director of the organization.
Oh, that's incredible. So you actually were pretty fortunate. Rather quickly, you were able to secure a job. What was the space of time between your actual release and starting work?
Maybe a month.
Oh, not much. So, and I'm sure there are people that look for months and probably years for a job where they have a criminal record. Check the box, you know, that, right?
I have been extremely blessed.
Yes, you certainly have. So if we look at reentry, what reforms are needed to help people who are coming out of prison and cannot find work? What could we do?
So the first thing we got to do is we got to realize that by the time people get out, it's too late in a lot of cases. You need to spend the one luxury of being incarcerated is that you have a lot of time. So we should help people spend that time productively. Help them do what they do in Denmark, do what they do in Norway. By the minute you get in, having a case manager who works with you to say, hey, what can we do to make sure this never happens again? What kind of job would you like to have? What are you good at? Have you ever thought about computer programming? What about welding? What about working in a warehouse? Well, what do you think? What can we get you certified to do in a high demand occupation where there is job availability near where you're going back to, that we can get you trained in over the next 4 years and come out of here, you know, saying, I've got 3.5 years experience as a computer programmer. So that's what we don't do. And that's what probably more than anything else contributes to the far lower recidivism rates in those countries. So then once people get home, we've got to make sure